The world never stops. Even now, while you are watching this, everything is moving. Not loudly, not dramatically, just constantly. Somewhere water is finding its way downward. Somewhere light is crossing empty space to reach a surface it has never touched before. Somewhere something is ending. And somewhere else, something is just beginning. We tend to think of stillness as the natural state, as if rest is where everything wants to arrive. But look closer. Look past the surface, and you will see that nothing, not one single thing in this world, is ever truly still. Even the things that appear motionless are in the middle of something. A rock face, a dry plain, a frozen surface, all of them changing, all of them participating, just at a pace that makes it easy to mistake for permanence. Water doesn't wait. Even when it looks calm, it is working, dissolving, carrying, shaping. Drop by drop, year by year, turning hard things soft, and soft things into nothing at all. It has no agenda, no destination that is chosen consciously. And yet, it always arrives exactly where it was always going to go. Downward, outward, through the path of least resistance. And if that path doesn't exist yet, water makes one. That is not stubbornness. That is simply what water is. Air is never empty. It holds heat and moisture and the memory of every place it has passed through. It moves in patterns so vast that no single eye can follow them. And yet, they are there, always, pressing, lifting, turning. The air above a warm surface rises, and the air around it rushes in to fill the space. This has been happening since before anything alive was here to feel it, and it will continue long after. You cannot see it directly, but you can see what it does. The way surfaces shift, the way things lean in directions they didn't choose, the way the world is constantly being rearranged by something invisible. Light doesn't pause. From the moment it leaves its source, it travels without rest until it finds something to land on. And in that landing, it changes both itself and the surface it touches. Light is not just something you see by. It is something that acts. It breaks down. It builds up. It carries energy across distances that make every human journey seem like a single step in a very long corridor. And yet, it arrives. Always. Crossing whatever space is between the source and the surface, without hesitation, without fatigue. Even the ground beneath your feet is not as solid as it seems. It breathes. It shifts. It carries the weight of everything above it and pushes back, slowly, in ways that take longer than a lifetime to see. The ground is not a foundation. It is a process, a slow conversation between pressure and release, between accumulation and collapse, between what is buried and what eventually rises again. We walk on top of a world that is moving beneath us at every moment, and we call it solid ground because we cannot feel the speed. This is what the world is made of. Not things, processes. We give names to things as though naming them makes them permanent, but the names outlast the things themselves by only a little. What we call a mountain is just a moment in a very long conversation between rock and wind and water. What we call a river is just the latest path that water has chosen on its way somewhere else. What we call a forest is 1,000 quiet negotiations between light and soil and time. And what we call a shore is simply the current answer to the question the water keeps asking. Every day, every tide, every wave. The answer changes. The question does not. Nothing here is finished. Everything is mid-sentence. And that is not a flaw. That is exactly the point. The world does not move toward completion. It moves because movement is what it means to exist. Completion would be stillness, and stillness here does not exist. Not in the deep layers of the ground, not in the slow drift of weather, not in the cycles that take centuries to close. Nowhere. And in the fraction we do receive, in the sounds and sights and textures available to ordinary human senses, even there, more is happening than we can process. We are surrounded, at every moment, by more worlds than we can hold. A cloud forms in the time it takes to finish a thought. A tide shifts direction without asking anyone's permission. A season ends not with a single moment, but with 10,000 small ones, each one unremarkable, each one necessary. Change does not announce itself. It simply arrives, already in progress. And we notice it only later, looking back at where we were and realizing the distance traveled. This is one of the stranger aspects of existing inside a world that never stops. You cannot step outside it to watch it change. You are changing with it. Every moment of observation is happening from inside the thing being observed. There is no fixed point. There is no place to stand that is not also moving. And yet, somehow, we orient. We find our way. We build reference points out of things that are themselves shifting, and we call that understanding. Perhaps it is. There is something profound in this, that the most powerful forces in nature are not the violent ones, not the storm, not the eruption, not the wave that breaks against the shore, but the ones that never stop. The slow dissolution, the quiet accumulation, the pressure that builds over centuries and then releases. Persistence is the deepest form of power. Water does not force its way through rock. It simply never stops trying. And eventually, the rock gives way. This is how the world works, not through force alone, but through continuity. A single drop of water does nothing to stone. But the same drop, falling in the same place 10,000 times, 100,000 times, 1,000,000, leaves a mark, deepens it, eventually passes all the way through. Not because the water became more powerful, but because it did not stop. Every surface you have ever seen has been shaped by something that refused to stop. Wind on sand, frost in stone, root through soil, wave on cliff. Each one patient, each one certain that time was on its side. And time always is. We measure the world in moments, in seconds and hours and years. But the world does not measure itself. It simply continues. There is no clock in nature, only sequence, only before and after, cause and consequence, motion and the change it leaves behind. The sequence has been running for longer than any number we use comfortably, and we are somewhere in the middle of it. Though quote, 0 is not quite right either, because we don't know where it ends, or if it does. We are somewhere in the sequence. That is all we know. And in every frame of that sequence, something is being lost, and something is being made at exactly the same time. This is not tragedy. This is the mechanism. The same force that wears something down is building something else, always, without exception. Erosion is just creation from a different angle. What disappears from one place reappears somewhere else, in a different form, at a different time, perhaps unrecognizable, but present, still part of the same unbroken chain. Nothing is lost. It only changes address. The material that makes up this world has been in circulation since before this world existed in its current form. Every particle has a history that stretches back further than we can trace, and every particle has a future that extends forward past anything we can imagine. We borrow from the sequence. We participate in it for a while. And then we return what we borrowed back to the circulation. Changed, perhaps, but still here, still part of it. Consider what it means for something to be a cycle. Not a circle, not something that returns exactly to where it began, but a cycle, something that comes around to a place that resembles the beginning but is not quite the same. The same general shape, the same general rhythm, but different in the details. Different in the specifics of temperature and pressure, the particular arrangement of material, the precise geometry of where things are and where they're going. Every cycle of water through the sky and ground and back again is the same cycle, and a different one. Every rotation of light and darkness follows the same pattern and produces a different day. Repetition in nature is never exact. It is always approximate. And in that approximation, in the gap between what happened before and what is happening now, that is where change lives. Quiet, incremental, nearly invisible, but real. And over enough repetitions, the small differences accumulate into something large. This is how the world evolves without anyone deciding to evolve it. Not through sudden transformation, but through the patient accumulation of nearly identical moments that are never quite the same. There is something to sit with in that. The idea that the world changes itself through repetition. That the act of doing the same thing again is never actually doing the same thing again, because the thing doing it has changed, and the surface it acts on has changed, and the context around it has shifted in 10,000 subtle ways since the last time. There is no true repeat. There is only the appearance of repetition from a distance. Up close, everything is new. And somewhere in this endless transformation, there is something that feels almost like a promise. That the world is not running down, it is running forward, always rearranging itself into something it has never been before, always becoming. There is a kind of order in the motion, not the order of a plan, not the order of an intention, but the order of patterns that repeat across scales. The way water moves at the edge of a surface mirrors the way larger flows move in the spaces above us. The way pressure builds and releases in one place echoes the way it builds and releases everywhere. The same shapes appear at different sizes. The same rhythms repeat at different speeds. As though the world has a small number of ideas and applies them everywhere, at every scale, endlessly. Not because someone decided this, but because these are simply the ways things work when left to their own logic. The logic of flow, the logic of pressure, the logic of accumulation, the logic of release. These are not rules that were written. They are patterns that emerged, and they have been emerging in the same way for longer than we know. Think about scale for a moment. We tend to experience the world at human scale, the size of things we can hold, the distances we can walk, the time scales that fit inside a life. But the world operates at every scale simultaneously. At the very small, things move and collide and combine in ways that produce everything we can see and touch. At the very large, forces act across distances so vast that the speeds involved seem impossible from where we stand. And in between, at the scale of weather and water and stone, the processes that shape this world's surface operate in a middle range that is still mostly beyond the reach of direct observation. We see the outcomes. We see the valley that was carved, the plain that was deposited, the surface that was smoothed. But the carving, the deposition, the smoothing, those happened mostly when we weren't looking, or over spans of time that no individual life can witness from beginning to end. We inherit the results of processes we did not observe, and we will leave results behind that others will inherit without having seen how they formed. This is the normal condition. To live inside outcomes whose origins are mostly invisible, and to contribute to outcomes whose consequences are mostly unknowable. And yet, the process continues, each stage handing something forward to the next, each moment becoming the material for whatever comes after. Nothing wasted, nothing simply ending. Everything being converted into the conditions for something else. A moment that will not return. The light falling right now will never fall in exactly this way again. The air moving right now carries a combination of warmth and cold that is unique to this second. And then it passes, and the next moment arrives. Different, but part of the same motion. Every moment is a transition, not a destination. We sometimes treat certain moments as though they were final, as though arriving at them means the movement can stop. But the movement does not stop. The world continues past every point we thought was an ending. And in that continuation, there is always something unexpected, something that the previous moment did not predict. That is not disorder. That is the nature of a system that is genuinely alive, by which I mean not planned in advance, not read from a script, but emerging in real time from the interaction of everything with everything else. We are not observers of this world. We are part of its motion. Every breath you take is an exchange, something given, something received. Every step you make leaves a trace, however small, however brief. You are not outside the process. You are inside it, always have been. The boundary between you and the world is not as clear as it seems. The air inside you was outside you a moment ago. The material you are made of was somewhere else before it was you. And it will be somewhere else again, in time. You are a temporary arrangement of things that are much older than you and will outlast you by far. But the arrangement matters. The fact that these things came together in this particular way, in this particular sequence, and produced something capable of noticing, that matters. The world does not need an audience, but it does not move without witnesses either. And perhaps that is what we are here for. Not to control the motion, not to stop it, not even to understand it fully, but to notice it, to pay attention to the 10,000 quiet ways the world is always changing. The water finding its level, the light crossing its impossible distances, the ground slowly breathing in timescales we can barely imagine. All of it happening at once, all of it connected, all of it in motion, and none of it asking for our permission. There is something freeing in that, to know that the world does not require anything from us in order to continue. It was here before we arrived. It will be here after we leave. And in between, in the brief window of our presence, we are given the opportunity to witness something that has never looked exactly like this before and never will again. That is not a small thing. Most of what this world does, it does without being seen. The changes that happen in the dark, at the bottom of things, under pressure, over time. No eye will ever find them. And they happen anyway. The world is not performing for us. It is simply doing what it does. When we happen to look, when we happen to be in the right place at the right moment, with our attention aimed outward, we get to see something that is genuinely happening, not for us, but in front of us. That is the gift. Not the world itself, but access to it. The fact that it is visible, audible, present. That it arrives at our senses from all directions and does not wait to be invited. It is already here. It has always been here. Think about what it means to actually look at something. Not to glance, not to categorize and move on, but to actually look. To stay with what you're seeing long enough for it to begin to reveal what is happening beneath the surface. Most things look static at first. A surface of stone, a body of still water, a sky that seems fixed and flat. But stay with it. Give it more than a moment. And the stone begins to show its history. the layers, the fractures, the evidence of forces that acted on it over time. The water begins to show its motion, the subtle changes at the surface, the play of light that reveals depth, the slow drift that shows which way things move. The sky begins to show its complexity, the gradations of color, the movement of air made visible, the way light changes even in the span of minutes. Nothing is as simple as it first appears. Everything rewards attention. And perhaps this is the most important thing, that the world is inexhaustible. No matter how long you look, there is always more to see. No matter how much you understand, there is always more happening than any understanding can capture. This is not a problem. This is precisely what makes it worth looking. All of it arriving at this moment. All of it passing through. Pay attention to what moves slowly. Most of what this world does is not fast. The dramatic moments, the sudden changes, the visible breaks, these are the exceptions. Underneath them, and between them, and long before and after them, the slow work continues. The kind of change that takes longer than a life to complete. The kind of movement that looks, at any given moment, like stillness. This is where most of the world's work happens. In the long, quiet intervals. In the accumulation of small things into something enormous. Pay attention to what moves slowly, because the slow things are the ones that last. And notice, too, what stillness actually contains. A surface that appears calm is not inactive. It is holding. It is in a kind of dynamic balance, forces acting against each other in ways that produce the appearance of rest without any actual absence of motion. Balance is not stillness. Balance is the agreement between opposing movements to cancel each other out for a while. And when that agreement ends, when one side gathers more than the other, the balance shifts. Not violently, usually, but decisively. And something that looked permanent turns out to have been waiting. Everything that appears stable is stable for a reason, and that reason is always temporary. The conditions that produce stability are themselves in motion. The forces that hold a balance are themselves changing. There is no truly permanent arrangement, only arrangements that have not yet encountered the thing that will change them. This is not cause for anxiety. It is simply the truth of a world in which nothing stands still. And there is a kind of relief in it, the understanding that what exists now is not the only thing that can exist, that the world has been different from this before, and will be different again. The current arrangement is not the final one. It is just the current one. And it is worth seeing clearly while it is here, before the water carves a little deeper, before the surface weathers a little further, before the slow, quiet, unstoppable work of time and motion carries this particular moment into the past, where it will become the raw material for whatever comes next, as everything does, as everything always has, before the first eye opened to observe it. It will be in motion long after the last one closes. And in between, there is this moment, this light, this air, this world, moving, always moving, in every direction at once, without beginning, without end. It does not need to be dramatic to be extraordinary. It is extraordinary because it is real, because it is happening, because it has been happening without pause for longer than we can hold in our minds. And we are here, right now, in the middle of it. The same motion that shaped everything you have ever seen is shaping something right now. Somewhere, something is being worn down that will become the material for something else. Somewhere, pressure is building that will one day release and rearrange something. Somewhere, water is doing what water always does, finding the way through, carrying what it collects, never stopping. And here, right here, in this moment, You are part of that same motion, breathing it in, moving through it, leaving your trace in it, however slight, however brief. You are not watching the world from a distance. You are made of it. When you pay attention, when you actually look at what is happening around you and notice the movement in things that seem still and sense the scale of what is quietly occurring, you are the world becoming aware of itself. That is what attention is. That is what it means to witness. Not observation from the outside, but recognition from within. The world knows itself through every point of awareness that arises inside it. And each one is temporary, and each one is irreplaceable. And each one sees something that no other point of awareness will ever see in quite the same way. This view, this moment, this particular angle on an infinite process. The light that reaches you right now has traveled to get here. It has crossed whatever distance lay between its source and this surface, this moment, this particular arrangement of things that will never repeat. And when it arrives, when it finally lands after all that travel, it is absorbed, or reflected, or scattered. It changes what it touches. It is changed by what it touches. Nothing passes through the world without leaving it slightly different. Not light, not water, not air, not you. Every presence has an effect. Every passage through a space leaves the space subtly altered. This is not burden. This is participation. To exist here is to be part of the chain of causes that produces what comes next. To breathe is to change the air. To move is to displace what was there. To look is to be part of the light's story. Because the light that reaches the eye has arrived somewhere, has completed a journey, has done what light does. You are not a passive observer of a world that happens around you. You are one of the things that is happening. Small, perhaps, brief, certainly, but real, and woven into the same fabric as everything else. The world was in motion before the first eye opened to observe it. It will be in motion long after the last one closes. And in between, there is this moment, this light, this air, this world, moving, always moving, in every direction at once, without beginning, without end. It does not need to be dramatic to be extraordinary. It is extraordinary because it is real, because it is happening, because it has been happening without pause for longer than we can hold in our minds. And we are here, right now, in the middle of it. The same motion that shaped everything you have ever seen is shaping something right now. Somewhere, something is being worn down that will become the material for something else. Somewhere, pressure is building that will one day release and rearrange something. Somewhere, water is doing what water always does, finding the way through, carrying what it collects, never stopping. And here, right here, in this moment, you are part of that same motion, breathing it in, moving through it, leaving your trace in it, however slight, however brief. Pay attention. Because it never looks exactly like this twice.